After I gave birth, my father Arthur Sterling wanted to surprise me and showed up at the hospital without warning. He looked impeccable, carrying that commanding presence of his that always made people straighten up. But the moment he noticed the simple baby clothes I had prepared and the few belongings arranged next to the bed, he frowned and asked bluntly, "Daughter, was the $5,000 I sent you every month really not enough?" I froze. The question hit me like a bucket of ice water. For a second I thought he might be joking, but my father was not the joking type, especially when it came to money. Still, I was so taken aback that I did not know how to react. I swallowed and answered honestly, "Father, I have managed with my savings and with the work I have done on my own." My answer left him stunned. His jaw tightened and his face flushed as if the blood had suddenly rushed to his head. And right then the door creaked open and Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller walked in. I had no idea what was about to unfold. And before we continue, tell us what city you're watching from. It matters to us to know how far our stories reach. The smell of disinfectant and the heavy air of the room were the first sensations Emily Sterling felt when she woke up. She opened her eyes slowly. Everything felt unfamiliar, yet she also felt a small sense of relief, as if at least there no one could demand anything more from her. Her whole body ached, especially her lower abdomen with a sharp pain that refused to fade. Still, that pain became more bearable when she turned her head to the side. In a simple transparent plastic crib lay a tiny little baby, still reddish and wrinkled. Her son William Sterling. Tears spilled out without permission. With the tip of her index finger, she gently stroked his cheek with infinite care, and felt that all the hours of labor, fear, and exhaustion had been worth it. Then she adjusted the shawl that had slipped on her shoulders. She had chosen a shared room at City General Hospital. Not because there were no other options, but because it was the most sensible choice for her financial situation and Kevin Miller's. The room had 4 beds, but at that moment only hers and another one in the far corner were occupied. The rest stood empty, with that strange calm hospitals have when there are few patients. A ceiling fan turned slowly, letting out a constant squeak, but at least it helped ease the heat. Emily Sterling looked at the baby again. A light blue wool blanket, bought months earlier at a flea market, wrapped his tiny body completely. She smiled until she remembered Barbara Miller's comment when she saw it. "Why do you buy this junk?" she had said with contempt. "It is going to irritate the baby's skin." And then without holding back she added, "You're far too stingy. How can you be so cheap with your own child?" Her heart tightened at the memory. That word, cheap, still hurt. She was not being harsh or miserly, she was trying to be realistic. Kevin Miller was just an office clerk at a private company, and his salary barely covered the basic expenses of a large city. To pay for the delivery and buy what the baby needed, she had worked nonstop. From the 6th month of pregnancy on, she began taking freelance graphic design jobs. She stayed up late into the night, sometimes until her back went stiff and her eyes burned from staring at the screen. She saved every penny. She denied herself cravings for expensive food. She swallowed her envy when she saw her friends showing off new handbags and clothes. She did everything for her son. Above all, she wanted to prove, to herself and to Barbara Miller, that she could be a good mother without becoming a burden. She sighed, exhausted. Kevin Miller was a good man but far too controlled by his mother. Every time Emily Sterling complained about Barbara Miller's comments or attitude, he would simply say, "Be patient, sweetheart. Mom is just like that. She's getting older. You have to understand her." He never defended her. And when it came to money, the situation was even more unfair. Kevin Miller handed over his entire paycheck to Barbara Miller for her to manage. Emily Sterling was given only a small amount for daily expenses, and often it was not enough for even the basics. One day, desperate, she told him plainly, "I am going to have to take on more work, Kevin." He barely looked up. He just nodded. "Sure, if you can do it, go ahead. But do not forget your duties as a wife." She snapped out of those thoughts when the door creaked open again. A nurse walked in with a kind smile. She approached the 4, checked the drip and asked calmly, "You are awake now, Mrs. Sterling? How are you feeling? Can you sit up?" "I am fine, thank you, still a bit sore but very happy," Emily Sterling replied in a hoarse voice. The nurse looked at the baby with satisfaction. He is very healthy and very handsome. He weighed 7 pounds and measured 19 inches. Perfect. Then she looked at Emily Sterling with sincere admiration. You have been very strong, Mrs. Sterling. You came to all your checkups and prepared everything on your own. Your husband told me you handled all the paperwork. You are a very independent woman. Emily Sterling barely smiled. Independent sounded nice, but the truth was she had been forced into it. When she was about to ask when Kevin Miller would be back, the door opened again. This time it was not a nurse, and it was not Kevin Miller or Barbara Miller either. Her heart began to race. In the doorway stood a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing an extremely expensive silk shirt. He had firm features and a natural authority. He looked tired, but he met her gaze directly. She whispered, unable to believe it. Father. It was Arthur Sterling. The moment he stepped inside, the shared room seemed to shrink. His cologne overpowered the smell of disinfectant, as if his presence filled the air. Arthur Sterling was a magnate, the owner of a vast business conglomerate. Emily Sterling was his only daughter, yet she had chosen a modest life when she married Kevin Miller. At first, that decision had met with her father's harsh opposition. Over time, their relationship cooled. She was too proud to ask for help, and he was too busy to ask questions. Father, how did you know I was here? Emily Sterling asked, trying to sit up. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen again, and she winced. I am still your father, Arthur Sterling replied in that deep, steady voice of his. He did not approach the bed. His gaze went straight to the crib. Behind him, his personal assistant carried a large basket of exotic fruit. Arthur Sterling stepped closer, slowly, and looked at his first grandson. For a moment, his stern face softened. It is a boy, he murmured. Yes, father, he is your grandson, Emily Sterling said with pride. He extended a finger and touched the tiny hand peeking out from the blanket. For an instant he seemed to smile, but the expression faded. His eyes swept over the room, the iron bed with peeling paint, the squeaking fan, and the pale blue blanket. Are you really staying in a room like this? He asked flatly, almost without emotion. His father. It is shared. As long as it is clean, it is enough, Emily Sterling replied, uncomfortable. Then he pointed at the blanket. And that blanket? Why is it so rough? I bought it at a flea market, father. It is good quality. I washed it thoroughly. Arthur Sterling fell silent. His face tightened. He looked at his daughter, and restrained anger appeared in his eyes. Emily, he said quietly but firmly. I came without warning to surprise you. I thought you would be in a suite at St. Jude's Medical Center. I believed you would give our grandson the very best. Father, He raised his hand to stop her. But look at what I see. Modest clothes, a cheap blanket, and this room. He took a deep breath as if trying to restrain himself. Then, with a harshness that completely disarmed her, he returned to the issue that had ignited him from the very beginning. Where is the money I sent every month? Emily Sterling felt her world stop. A nervous, broken laugh escaped her. Father, what are you talking about? Do you really think I was receiving that money? Arthur Sterling's voice rose, hard and cutting. I never joke about money. Especially when it concerns my only daughter. Her heart began to race. She searched her father's eyes for any sign of a lie, any gesture that would suggest a misunderstanding. She found nothing. Only genuine fury. Father, you never sent me that money, she said, her voice cracking. I paid for everything with my savings and with what I earned working on my own. A heavy silence fell. It felt as if even the fan had stopped squeaking. Arthur Sterling stared at her, eyes wide open. His face, pale from exhaustion moments earlier, turned red with anger. It was not embarrassment, it was a growing rage. Then he understood. He understood why his daughter looked so thin and worn out. He understood why his grandson was wrapped in such a simple blanket. He muttered under his breath, almost like a growl. Working on your own, your savings. And at that exact moment the door opened again. Before they even stepped inside, Barbara Miller's shrill laughter echoed from the hallway. Ha ha. Oh Kevin, you're too much. You will buy me another designer bag later, right? As long as the color matches, I do not care. Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller walked in carrying bags from a luxury boutique. But the instant they saw Arthur Sterling standing beside the bed, their laughter died. Barbara Miller's eyes, bright just a second earlier, froze. She stood rigid in the doorway, gripping the bags tightly. Beside her, Kevin Miller looked like a deer caught in headlights, pale with the bags nearly slipping from his hands. Emily Sterling looked at them, then at the bags. From one of Barbara Miller's bags peeked a red leather handbag that, by the look of it, must have cost a fortune. Then she looked at William Sterling's simple blanket, and something began to throb in her head, painful and relentless. Arthur Sterling did not move. He simply pierced them with a stare so intense it felt like it could strip them bare. His anger was dense, like suffocating heat filling the small room. Barbara Miller was the first to break the silence. Her instinct to control the situation kicked in immediately. She quickly set the bags down on the floor just outside the room and put on a smile so forced it looked like a grimace. Well, Arthur Sterling, what a surprise. You're already here. You could have let us know. Oh, you have finally come to meet your grandson, she said in a syrupy voice as if nothing were wrong. Kevin Miller stammered nervously as well. Yes, father, excuse us. We just arrived. We stepped out for a moment to get something to eat. Then awkwardly he tried to hide the bags behind his back. The gesture was as useless as it was ridiculous. Arthur Sterling did not respond to the greeting. He did not take his eyes off them. To eat, huh? He growled. From what I can see, you ate at a luxury boutique. Barbara Miller felt cornered, but she tried to hide it. No, we just ran an errand for a friend. We were on our way to the hospital cafeteria. Father, what is going on? What is happening? Emily Sterling whispered, still confused. He felt dizzy. What is all this? Arthur Sterling ignored her. He stepped forward. His presence made Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller instinctively step back. I am going to ask you one more time, he said in a low, dangerous voice. Kevin Miller, Mrs. Miller, where is the $5,000 a month that was meant for my daughter? This time Emily Sterling did not laugh. Her confusion turned into horror. She looked at her husband, waiting for an answer. Kevin Miller swallowed hard. A large bead of sweat began to slide down his forehead. He looked at his mother, silently asking for help. Barbara Miller rushed forward. Her fake kindness shifted into a rehearsed look of sadness. She even pressed a hand to her chest as if she were truly shocked. What money, Arthur Sterling? $5,000? My goodness, how outrageous, she exclaimed. We have no idea what you are talking about. On the contrary, sir, we are the ones who have been struggling. Struggling? Arthur Sterling repeated with a chill that was terrifying. Yes, sir, Barbara Miller said, her tone turning accusatory. The thing is, Emily Sterling is wasteful. You do not know the true face of your daughter. The air left Emily Sterling's lungs. Mother-in-law, when have I ever asked for anything expensive? She protested, her voice trembling. I have not asked for anything. Oh, stop pretending to be innocent, Barbara Miller snapped bitterly. You asked for designer maternity clothes, those strange ones. You asked for food from expensive restaurants. My Kevin was desperate. We had to tighten our belts to cover your whims. It was a massive lie. Emily Sterling remembered it perfectly. She had only a few maternity outfits, all bought at the flea market. And when it came to food, she had often gone hungry because Barbara Miller cooked just enough and constantly insisted they needed to save. Mother-in-law, that is a lie, Emily Sterling said, tears filling her eyes. When have I ever wasted money? On the contrary, I contributed to the household expenses with the money I earned working on my own. I bought everything for the baby with my own money. You even called me stingy for buying a cheap blanket. See? Barbara Miller shot back, feeling superior as she watched her cry. Working on your own? Of course. You probably spent that money on your whims without giving a single penny to your husband. Then she looked at Arthur Sterling as if she had already won. Do you see, sir? You ask her politely and she starts crying. Such a crybaby. Kevin, look at your wife. Kevin Miller kept his head down, not daring to look at Emily Sterling or certainly at his father-in-law. Emily Sterling shook her head over and over, tears streaming down her cheeks. She finally looked up, her voice broken. "Father, that is not true. Please, believe me." Arthur Sterling looked at his daughter crying on the bed, then fixed his eyes on Barbara Miller, who still stood there, proud, her face full of lies. His fury reached its limit. "Enough," he growled. He did not need to shout. His deep, restrained voice made the room tremble. Barbara Miller shrank instantly. Arthur Sterling slowly turned and focused all his attention on Kevin Miller. "Kevin Miller, I am not speaking to your mother. I am speaking to you as my daughter's husband." Kevin Miller lifted his head slightly. His lips trembled. "Yes, Father." Then Arthur Sterling spoke with a coldness that cut like a blade. "For 3 years of marriage, on the first day of every single month, I transferred $5,000 to your bank account. I did it in your name on purpose, not in Emily Sterling's, because I assumed that you, as the head of the family, would manage that money for my daughter's well-being." Emily Sterling's chest tightened as if her heart were being crushed. $5,000 for 3 years. Every single month. He felt dizzy. It was an amount she could not even begin to comprehend. "I did not tell Emily Sterling on purpose," Arthur Sterling continued. "I wanted her to feel that her husband was taking care of her, that she could live peacefully without lacking anything. But what do I see today?" He pointed at the baby's blanket. "My daughter gives birth in a shared room and my grandson is wrapped in a cheap rag. And meanwhile," his hand gestured toward the door where the bags were, "you have just come back from indulging yourselves." "Father, this is a misunderstanding," Kevin Miller stammered. That money was used for." "For what did you use it, Kevin Miller?" Arthur Sterling pressed, never taking his eyes off him. Kevin Miller swallowed. "For household expenses, Father. The mortgage, the car payments, the house." Arthur Sterling let out a sarcastic laugh. "The house you live in is not even in your mother's name. And the car? Since when can an office clerk afford a luxury car on installments?" Barbara Miller felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. She jumped in immediately, trying to regain control. "Well, but it is also our money, Arthur Sterling. Kevin Miller's money counts too. It is normal for him to use it for his family, including his mother." Arthur Sterling looked at her with contempt. "So," he said, emphasizing every word, "you took the money that was meant for my daughter and used it for your own benefit. Meanwhile, my pregnant daughter was working late into the night." Kevin Miller rushed to justify himself. "Emily Sterling wanted to work, Father. She said she was bored at home." "Bored?" Emily Sterling repeated softly as if the word burned her. Her voice broke. Her heart was shattered. "I worked because the money you gave me was never enough, Kevin. I worked because your mother would not even give me enough to buy vitamins." The tension once again filled the room as if the air itself had doubled in weight. Arthur Sterling looked at his son-in-law with a murderous expression. "I do not want any more excuses." He slipped a hand into the pocket of his expensive suit and pulled out his phone. "Show me your bank account transactions right now." Kevin Miller froze. He felt it was the end. "Father, please, not here. This is embarrassing," he whispered. "Embarrassing?" Arthur Sterling roared. "After deceiving my daughter for 3 years, now you talk to me about embarrassment?" He delivered the order like a blow. "Show it to me. Now." Kevin Miller was shaking as he pulled out his phone. "There is no signal in the hospital, Father." It was a pathetic lie. He could barely hold the device. "Stop making things up." Barbara Miller suddenly shouted. "Or what, Arthur Sterling? Are you trying to rub your money in our faces? Do you think that because you have money you can insult us like this? My Kevin works too. We have our own money. We do not need yours." Arthur Sterling did not even blink. "If you did not need it, why did you use it?" The question fell like a stone. Barbara Miller was left speechless. Her face burned with rage and humiliation. Arthur Sterling looked back at Kevin Miller. "I am going to count to 3. 1, 2. Kevin Miller trembled. He looked at his mother, then at Emily Sterling, who was crying uncontrollably on the bed. He was trapped. But Arthur Sterling cut him off coldly as if he were no longer worth the effort. I do not need to see your phone. He dialed a number and waited barely a second. Hello. Send me right now a complete statement of all the monthly transfers to the account under Kevin Miller's name over the last 3 years. And a full record of every expense from that account. Right now. He hung up and then looked at both of them. You take me for a fool. I have always monitored the flow of that money. I only wanted to hear you admit it with your own mouths. But you chose to lie. Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller collapsed into the hard chairs in the waiting area, as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. They knew the game was over. The silence in the room was thick, heavier than the stale hospital air. The fan kept squeaking, and the only thing Emily Sterling could hear was her own heart pounding in her ears. The number kept spinning in her head. $180,000. $5,000 a month for 3 years. She looked at her father, then at Kevin Miller with his head bowed, and at Barbara Miller, pale as a wall. She tried to reconcile that reality with her recent life. 3 years of struggle, deprivation, and guilt for not contributing enough, for believing she was a burden. Suddenly, fragments of memories came crashing down on her, now carrying a new and painful meaning. She remembered when she was 4 months pregnant. It was not a luxury whim. She was desperately craving mangoes, slightly more expensive but perfectly ripe, from the supermarket. She felt ashamed to ask, but eventually gathered the courage and told Kevin Miller. As always, he passed it on to Barbara Miller, and Barbara Miller replied with contempt. Why buy something so expensive? There is plenty at the market. Do not be so demanding. The next day Barbara Miller brought mangoes, but they were the nearly rotten, discounted kind, soft, watery, and bland. Eat these. And when Emily Sterling tried to protest, she finished it with, mangoes are mangoes. Emily Sterling cried in secret in the bathroom as she forced herself to eat that sour, fibrous fruit, fighting back nausea. And now she understood. The day she had asked for $20 worth of mangoes, $5,000 had gone into Kevin Miller's account. She also remembered when she was 7 months pregnant. Her belly was already huge, her back aching as if it were breaking, yet she still forced herself to keep up with her design work to meet deadlines. She sat at the narrow dining table in front of her computer until 3 in the morning. The baby would not stop kicking as if protesting. Kevin Miller came out of the bedroom, not to comfort her but just to get some water. He saw her exhausted, with deep dark circles under her eyes. And instead of saying rest or, I will help you, he said, do not forget to get up early. Make breakfast for my mother before I leave for work. He let her work herself to the limit, while there was enough money in his account to hire a dozen assistants. Then she remembered the visits to the gynecologist. The doctor prescribed a high-dose vitamin complex and calcium. The baby was fine, but the mother was malnourished. Mrs. Sterling, you need to take this, the doctor told her, so you will have enough strength for the delivery. Emily Sterling looked at the total price. $100. With the money Barbara Miller rationed to her for daily expenses, she did not have that amount. She went back home and showed it to Kevin Miller. And as always, the one who answered was Barbara Miller. Are those vitamins really that expensive? Doctors only want to squeeze money out of people. I did not take anything when I was pregnant with Kevin, and look at him. Perfectly healthy. Just take the iron they give for free at the health center. Do not be weak. That night Emily Sterling cried. He felt like a failure, like a bad mother. Even before her son was born, she already felt she could not give him the best. In the end, she discreetly contacted a client and asked for more work in exchange for an advance. A week later, she bought the vitamins with the money she had worked so hard to earn and had to lie to Barbara Miller, saying a friend had given them to her. While she was breaking her back to pay for something as basic as her health, they, her husband and her mother-in-law, lived as if money were endless. Emily Sterling's tears fell silently. They were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, regret, and the realization of how naive she had been. Emily, sweetheart. Kevin Miller's trembling voice pulled her out of that spiral. He tried to take her hand. She yanked it away sharply. Do not touch me. Arthur Sterling's phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. Emails and messages poured in one after another. His personal assistant had been fast. Arthur Sterling did not need to open a computer. The large phone screen showed him everything. His face remained calm but his eyes burned. "Kevin Miller," he said with dangerous calm, "your bank statement is fascinating." Kevin Miller lowered his head even more. "Let us see," Arthur Sterling continued, serene and lethal. "Last month, a deposit of $5,000 from me on the first day. On the fourth, a card payment at a luxury restaurant, $300. It must have been quite a dinner." Barbara Miller began to grow uneasy. "On the seventh," Arthur Sterling went on, "a payment at a luxury boutique, $2,500. He lifted his eyes from the phone and looked straight at Barbara Miller. "I assume this is the handbag you bragged about at your social gatherings. The one you said your son bought you with the sweat of his brow." Barbara Miller flinched. "Have you been spying on us?" "There is no need to spy," he replied coldly. "I protect my assets. And my daughter is my most valuable asset, one you abused." He looked back at the screen. 3 months ago, another deposit of $5,000. And a week later, a down payment for a red sports car, registered in Kevin Miller's name. Emily Sterling's eyes widened. "A car? The red car you told me belonged to the company, Kevin?" Kevin Miller stammered. It was a bonus, Emily, a bonus. A bonus." Arthur Sterling let out a dry laugh. "Your company does not give bonuses like that. I know your exact salary and I know your work results. This money," he tapped the screen, "is my daughter's money." Barbara Miller jumped to her feet. She could no longer contain herself. Her face turned red with rage. "So what? What does it matter? It is Kevin's right. He's my son. It is normal for a son to take care of his mother, to give her gifts." "Take care of his mother with money stolen from his wife?" Arthur Sterling asked sharply. "Who did he steal from?" Barbara Miller shot back fiercely. "It is her husband's money. It is his right. Besides, you transferred it to Kevin's account yourself, did you not? Then it belongs to Kevin, not to Emily. If it was really for her, why did you not deposit it into her account?" "Because I trusted you," Arthur Sterling growled. "I trusted that a husband would take responsibility. I was wrong." "Yes, you were wrong," Barbara Miller exclaimed, feeling victorious. "So that money was ours by right. If we bought handbags, cars, or remodeled the house, that is our business. You have no right to interfere." "Remodel the house." Emily Sterling's blood ran cold. 2 months earlier, the house had been completely renovated. The kitchen had been expanded. In Barbara Miller's bedroom, they had installed a new air conditioner and a private bathroom. Meanwhile, Emily Sterling had been forced to sleep in the narrow living room for an entire month. Barbara Miller had explained that the money came from a savings pool. Emily Sterling's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She looked at her husband. "Kevin, is what your mother is saying true? Do you really think that was your right?" Kevin Miller did not have the strength to answer. He just broke down crying, but those tears did not seem sincere. He was not crying for Emily Sterling. He was crying for himself. Suddenly, Kevin Miller dropped to his knees. He did not do it before Emily Sterling, but before Arthur Sterling. He crawled across the floor, trying to cling to his father-in-law's feet. "Father, forgive me. I made a mistake. It was my mother who forced me. Father, I promise you I will change. I will pay the money back. But please, do not make me lose my job. Please do not call the police." Emily Sterling watched him in disbelief. Even in a moment like this, the only thing Kevin Miller feared was losing his job and ending up in prison. Not losing his wife's trust. Not feeling remorse for abandoning her and their son. Then another alert sounded. Arthur Sterling's phone vibrated again. It was a text message from his personal assistant. Arthur Sterling read it, and his expression hardened even further. He looked at Kevin Miller, still kneeling on the floor. "Get up," he ordered. Kevin Miller did not react. "I said get up," Arthur Sterling shouted. Kevin Miller jumped to his feet, startled. Arthur Sterling stared at him. "My assistant has just sent me the asset tracking report. You were smarter than I thought. You did not just spend the money, you used it to buy assets in your own names. Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller froze. The red car is fully paid for and registered to Kevin Miller. And so is the house you live in. Arthur Sterling turned his gaze toward Barbara Miller. The mortgage was backed by the bank and you used the money I sent you to pay off the renovation loan. You did not just steal. You also committed money laundering. Arthur Sterling turned away. He no longer looked at his daughter's husband or her mother-in-law. He looked at Emily Sterling, who sat silently on the bed, her eyes completely dry. He called to her in a gentle voice. I will ask you one more time. After everything you have heard and everything you have discovered, do you want to stay with this man and in this marriage? The question hung in the air. The shared room was plunged into a deathly silence. All eyes turned to Emily Sterling. Kevin Miller watched her with a pleading expression, drenched in sweat. Barbara Miller stared at her with sharp eyes, full of hatred. Emily Sterling looked at her father. The man who had always seemed cold and distant now stood before her as her shield. Then she looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in his crib. An innocent being who had almost grown up surrounded by lies. A baby who deserved something far better. Slowly, Emily Sterling shifted her gaze toward Kevin Miller, her husband, the man she had loved or at least believed she loved, the man she had defended against her father 3 years earlier, the man she had trusted to lead her family. Before Emily Sterling could answer, Barbara Miller could not contain herself any longer. Her patience was gone. The mask of the suffering, understanding mother-in-law had fallen long ago. That is enough already. Stop making that pitiful face, Barbara Miller shouted, pointing at Emily Sterling. Do you think you are going to scare us? Yes, we used the money. So what? Is that wrong? It was money my son received from his father-in-law. Of course. Kevin Miller tried to grab his mother by the arm. Mom, stop please. Shut up, Kevin, Barbara Miller cut him off. You are spineless. You are afraid of your wife and your father-in-law. She lifted her chin and stared defiantly at Arthur Sterling, Emily Sterling's father. Listen to me carefully, Arthur Sterling. I opposed Kevin marrying your daughter from the very beginning. I knew a rich girl would be spoiled, useless, someone who would only want to be served. And in the end I was right. Arthur Sterling raised an eyebrow, letting her continue. We thought that by marrying the daughter of a magnate our life would be easier, that some of that wealth would rub off on us. But it did not. Emily lived a fake life, pretending to be independent, dressing in rags, eating whatever was available. I was ashamed in front of the neighbors, in front of my friends. My daughter-in-law, married to the son of a businessman, looked like a beggar. People would think we were not treating her well, when in reality she was stingy. Emily Sterling murmured, Mother-in-law. What? You are so uptight. You saved until you wore yourself out. My grandson is about to be born and you buy him that cheap blanket. How was I supposed to look people in the eye? Barbara Miller grew more and more heated. So when you sent that money to Kevin, I told my son very clearly, this is your reward, son. Your pay for putting up with this woman. And of course we used it. We enjoyed it. We bought good things so people would stop looking down on us, so I could brag at my gatherings that my son was a successful man, even if his wife looked like she was homeless. Every word coming out of Barbara Miller's mouth was like a blade driven into Emily Sterling's heart. Naive, beggar, stingy, spoiled, homeless. And you, Emily, Barbara Miller continued, pointing at her again, you are an idiot. With the good husband you have, an obedient man, why were you so determined to work so much? For what? What were you going to do with all that money? $5,000 a month. A woman like you would have spent it all on cosmetics and clothes. Much better for me to have it. I bought gold. I invested in luxury handbags. That is an investment. Their value keeps going up, far better than letting money be wasted in your hands. Her hateful monologue finally ended. Barbara Miller was panting, her chest rising and falling hard. She looked satisfied, as if she had spat out all her poison. A brief silence followed. Emily Sterling's tears had already dried. Her face was pale, but there was no sadness left in her eyes. Only an emptiness that slowly turned into a cold, burning flame. Emily Sterling ignored Barbara Miller completely. She did not even look at her. She focused all her attention on Kevin Miller, her husband, who stood trembling between her and his mother. Kevin Miller said her name. Emily Sterling's voice was unbelievably calm, almost expressionless. Kevin Miller flinched. He did not expect her to speak to him so calmly. "Yes, sweetheart. I am only going to ask you one thing," Emily Sterling said. "I'm not going to ask you about the car or the house. Just one thing." Kevin Miller swallowed. "What, Emily?" "When I was 7 months pregnant," Emily Sterling's voice was low but firm, "the doctor said I was malnourished and I asked you to buy me a prenatal smoothie that cost $50. Your mother said there was no money." Kevin Miller started shaking. "I am asking you, Kevin. That day you knew your mother was lying, did you not?" Kevin Miller dropped his gaze. He did not dare look his wife in the eyes. He remembered that day perfectly. After Emily Sterling went into the bedroom, his mother had laughed. "What smoothie? Condensed milk is good enough," she had said. And Kevin Miller had stayed silent. "Answer me, Kevin," Emily Sterling insisted. Kevin Miller nodded very slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he whispered. "One more thing," Emily Sterling continued. "When I was working until 3 in the morning in front of my laptop, my back destroyed and the baby kicking nonstop, you saw me, did you not?" Kevin Miller tried to justify himself. "You saw me." Emily Sterling cut him off, repeating the question. "And you knew there were hundreds of thousands of dollars in your account that my father was sending for me?" "That is not a question. It is a statement." Kevin Miller could not dodge it anymore. He knew Emily Sterling did not want an explanation, only confirmation. He bowed his head hard. This time his nod was unmistakable. Emily Sterling's world collapsed. But in the wreckage she stayed steady. She had all the answers she needed. 3 years of patience. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of love. All of it had been for nothing. She took a deep breath. The pain from her stitches was nothing compared to the pain tearing through her heart. Emily Sterling lifted her head. She did not look at Kevin Miller anymore. She looked straight into her father's eyes. "Father," her voice sounded firm and strong, "I have my answer." Arthur Sterling looked at her, waiting. "Get me and my son out of here right now." Barbara Miller froze. "What? You are leaving?" "I am getting a divorce," Emily Sterling continued. "What?" Kevin Miller shouted, showing for the first time an emotion that was not fear. "Emily, no, please. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain. It is all my mother's fault. I love you, Emily. For our son." "Our son." Emily Sterling let out a sarcastic laugh, cold and chilling. "The son you covered with a blanket you called cheap. The son you denied vitamins. The son whose mother you let work herself to exhaustion while you lived like kings. Do not say my son's name again. How disrespectful you are, Emily." Barbara Miller screamed. "Your father felt a little sorry for you and now you have turned arrogant. Get divorced if you want. Do you think you can live without Kevin? Who is going to want a divorced woman with a child? You will come crawling back to beg us for money." Emily Sterling barely formed a small smile. "Mrs. Miller," Arthur Sterling's voice was so cold it felt like it could freeze fire, "you have chosen the wrong enemy." Without wasting time, Arthur Sterling dialed a number on his phone. "Hello. Get my best team of lawyers ready right now," he said, looking directly at Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller. "Full authority. Arrange to move my daughter and my grandson to the downtown penthouse. File a divorce petition in Emily Sterling's name. Demands full custody." Arthur Sterling allowed himself a faint smile, one that never reached his eyes. "And a claim for material and moral damages. Claim $180,000, plus interest. Freeze and seize every asset in Kevin Miller's and Barbara Miller's names that was acquired with that money. I want them left with nothing. Immediately." The shared room seemed to shrink. The air, once stale, now felt dense, charged with poison. Arthur Sterling's orders were concise, clear and merciless. His words kept echoing in Kevin Miller's and Barbara Miller's ears. "What? Seize assets? The police." Barbara Miller was the first to react, her voice hoarse. "Arthur Sterling, you cannot be serious. This is a family matter." Kevin Miller, for his part, looked as if his soul had been ripped out. His legs wobbled. Father, please do not do this," he whimpered, trying one last time to appeal to his compassion. "I will work, Father. I will pay it back. I will divorce. Do not send me to jail, Father, please." Arthur Sterling did not respond. He slipped the phone back into the pocket of his suit. His gaze remained fixed on Emily Sterling. "Are you ready, daughter?" he asked gently, as if the two panicking people in front of him were nothing but shadows. Emily Sterling nodded. Her hands, which had been clutching the blanket, now relaxed little by little. She had made her choice. There was no doubt. "I am ready, Father." "No, you are not leaving," Kevin Miller suddenly shouted. He lunged forward, trying to grab the edge of the bed. "Emily, listen to me. It is all my mother's fault. He poisoned my mind. I love you, Emily, for our son." Before Kevin Miller's hand could touch the bed, his body was intercepted by Arthur Sterling's personal assistant, a large man in a black suit who had remained silent by the door. He moved quickly and efficiently, stopping him with a firm hand to the chest, his face completely blank. "Excuse me, sir. Keep your distance. Let me go. That woman is my wife," Kevin Miller yelled. "She is not your wife anymore," Arthur Sterling declared. Then Arthur Sterling pressed the call button for the nurse next to Emily Sterling's bed. "I will not allow my daughter to remain one more second in this hell you created." The door opened. It was not only a nurse who entered, but also two hospital security guards and the supervisor, who apparently had already been alerted by Arthur Sterling's assistant. "What is going on, Arthur Sterling? Why is there such a commotion in this room?" the supervisor asked with a frown. "I am the patient's father, Arthur Sterling," Arthur Sterling replied calmly. "I am transferring my daughter immediately, and I am asking you to remove these two people," he said, pointing to Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller, "from this room. They are disturbing the patient's peace." "What? Throw us out. That woman is my wife and that child is my son," Kevin Miller protested. "We are her husband and her mother-in-law," Barbara Miller added. The supervisor looked confused. "Excuse me, Arthur Sterling, but procedure. Who handled my daughter's admission paperwork?" Arthur Sterling cut her off. "Mrs. Sterling did it herself, sir, under her own name," a nurse replied after checking the records. "Perfect," Arthur Sterling said. "Now I am taking over. Move my daughter and my grandson to the best suite at St. Jude's Medical Center. All expenses are on me. And forbid these two people," he pointed again at Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller, "from coming within 100 yards of my daughter." Barbara Miller's eyes widened. "Kevin, your wife is getting away. Do something, you useless man." But Kevin Miller could not do anything. Two security guards stood on either side of him. At that moment, 3 more men entered the room. They were not hospital staff. They wore impeccable suits, far more expensive than what Kevin Miller had worn on his wedding day. Each of them carried a leather briefcase. "Good afternoon, Arthur Sterling," the man in the middle said. "We are your legal team." Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller went rigid. This was real. It was not a bluff. The lawyer did not even glance at them. He spoke directly to Arthur Sterling. "All documentation is ready, sir. The power of attorney, the draft divorce petition, and the initial report for the police." Then he turned toward Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller. His expression was polite, almost friendly, but his eyes were cold as ice. "Good afternoon, Mr. Kevin Miller, Mrs. Miller. I represent our client, Arthur Sterling, and the woman who will soon also be our client, Mrs. Sterling. I do not want a divorce," Kevin Miller stammered, panicked. "That decision is no longer yours, Mr. Kevin Miller," the lawyer replied calmly. "At this moment you have 2 options. I suggest you listen very carefully." While the lawyer spoke, the hospital staff moved quickly. A wheelchair arrived for Emily Sterling, and a nurse wheeled in a private newborn bassinet, with a soft cashmere blanket, more suitable and more comfortable for the baby. With the nurse's help, Emily Sterling sat up slowly and for the first time, cradled her son with a real sense of relief. "The first option," the lawyer continued, breaking the silence with his steady voice, "is that you sign these documents. A debt acknowledgement confirming you received and used $180,000. A divorce agreement. The transfer of full custody to Mrs. Sterling and the transfer of ownership of a red sports car and the house as a first payment to return those funds. What? Not our house. Barbara Miller shouted. It is in my name. A house renovated and paid off with money that was not yours, the lawyer replied without changing his tone. Mrs. Miller, if you cooperate and sign everything today, our client may, and I repeat, may show mercy and not pursue criminal charges for misappropriation of funds and money laundering. Kevin Miller looked at his mother, terrified. Prison. The word echoed in his head again and again. And the second option? Kevin Miller whispered, his voice barely audible. The lawyer's smile vanished. The second option is that you refuse. In that case, we will file the civil lawsuit this afternoon and, at the same time, file the criminal complaint with the police. The proof of the transfers, the recording of your confession a moment ago, he gestured to Arthur Sterling's phone, and your bank statements are more than enough. We guarantee you will not win. You will lose everything and, most importantly, you will spend a good amount of time behind bars. Choose. Barbara Miller was trembling. Her face, red with rage minutes earlier, was now pale as paper. Her arrogance had evaporated. Only fear remained. In the middle of the chaos, Emily Sterling was already seated in the wheelchair, holding her baby ready to leave. Arthur Sterling stayed at her side. His personal assistant pushed the chair. As they reached the doorway, Kevin Miller made one last desperate attempt. He wrenched himself free from the guards and dropped to his knees on the floor. Sweetheart, do not go, he screamed, devastated. I am sorry, I was wrong. I will kiss your feet. Please do not leave me. Emily Sterling gestured for the personal assistant to stop. Kevin Miller looked up at her with hopeful eyes. Emily. Emily Sterling looked at her husband's face. The face she had once loved, now soaked in crocodile tears. She felt nothing, no compassion, no love. Only exhaustion. Slowly she turned her gaze forward. Move, she ordered softly to the personal assistant. The wheelchair began to roll again. She left Kevin Miller kneeling in the hallway and Barbara Miller collapsed into a chair, staring in shock at the stack of legal documents the lawyer held. At the end of the hallway, the elevator doors opened. Emily Sterling entered with her father without looking back. Emily. Kevin Miller's desperate scream was the last thing she heard before the elevator doors closed, carrying her toward her new life. Inside the private elevator, spacious, smelling of expensive cleaning products, the silence was absolute. Only the soft hum of machinery could be heard as they rose. Emily Sterling rested her head against the wheelchair back. She closed her eyes for a moment and tightened her embrace around the small baby in her lap. She could feel the tiny heartbeat, rhythmic and calm, a brutal contrast to the storm she had just left behind. Arthur Sterling was beside her, one protective hand on the wheelchair handle. He said nothing. He knew his daughter needed time. The elevator doors opened, but not onto a regular hallway. They opened directly into a private, luxurious vestibule on the top floor. The suite at St. Jude's Medical Center looked more like a five-star hotel room. Thick carpets, wood-paneled walls, warm lighting that softened the air. Another nurse, along with the supervisor, was already waiting for them. Welcome, Mrs. Sterling. Arthur Sterling, the room is ready. They led them inside. Emily Sterling caught her breath. It was enormous. There was a separate sitting area, a comfortable velvet sofa, and a state-of-the-art motorized patient bed. But what caught her attention most was the gigantic floor-to-ceiling window with a panoramic view of Seattle, Washington. The evening sky was already beginning to turn orange. In one corner stood a beautiful solid wood crib, perfectly stocked with premium baby items, all still in their original packaging, an entirely different world from the plastic crib and the blanket from the flea market. Rest, ma'am. I will help you move the baby, the nurse said gently. Emily Sterling hesitated for a second. She did not want to let her son go. Arthur Sterling seemed to understand instantly. Let me hold him. And carefully, Arthur Sterling took his first grandson from Emily Sterling's arms. The man who had always seemed so cold looked a little awkward, but in his eyes there was immense tenderness. "Hello, little champion. Welcome to the family," he whispered to the baby. And in that moment, seeing her father holding her son in that safe, luxurious room, all the tension Emily Sterling had been holding in for hours, or perhaps for years, finally broke. Her shoulders began to shake. A sob escaped her. Then another. She covered her face with her hands and her crying turned into a torrent. She cried. It was not the cry of pain or rage from the other room. It was a cry of relief, a cry that washed away wounds, lies, and humiliations. She cried for everything she had swallowed over the past 3 years. She cried for her own foolishness. She cried for the years she had lost. And she cried because at last she was free. Arthur Sterling quickly handed the baby to the nurse and knelt beside Emily Sterling's wheelchair. He wrapped his arms tightly around his daughter. "Cry, my daughter. Let it all out. It is over now. Everything is finished. Father, I am sorry." Emily Sterling sobbed into his shoulder. "I was so stupid. Shoo," Arthur Sterling interrupted gently. "You are not stupid. You're just too good. And they took advantage of your kindness. From now on no one will ever hurt you again. I promise." Meanwhile, downstairs in the shared room the scene was very different. Kevin Miller's desperate shouts in the hallway did not stop the lawyers. They re-entered the room where Barbara Miller was still sitting stiffly. Kevin Miller stumbled in behind them, unsteady, his steps weak and his eyes empty. "Very well," said the lead lawyer, placing a stack of documents and a pen on the table in front of Barbara Miller. "Negotiation time is over. It is time to decide, prison or signature." Barbara Miller looked at the papers. On the first page the title was clear: Debt Acknowledgement and Asset Transfer. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount: $180,000. This is robbery," she growled. "This is justice, Mrs. Miller," the lawyer replied coldly. "Consider it a discount. If we take this to court, the amount could triple with bank interest and damages for emotional harm, without even mentioning our fees, which would also be your responsibility. And the bonus of some time behind bars." Barbara Miller's hands trembled. She looked at Kevin Miller. "Kevin, look at this. We are going to end up on the street." He did not answer. He stared at the wall. His world had already collapsed. His car, his position at the company, he was certain Arthur Sterling would take everything from him. And now his house as well. "The house, Mom," Kevin Miller whispered, clinging to the last thread of sanity he had left. "Sign." "What? You are giving up just like that?" Barbara Miller screamed, completely unhinged. That house belongs to my mother. If we end up in prison, we will not even be able to live there." Then she burst into a bitter laugh, jumping to her feet. "My fault? Do not make me laugh. You enjoyed it too. You were the one driving that car. You were the one puffing up when they called you a successful man. And now you want to blame me, you ungrateful fool." The argument was about to explode, but the lawyer's voice cut through it sharply. "Enough. We are not paid to witness family drama. Either you sign, or I call the police right now." He pulled out his phone to prove he was not bluffing. Barbara Miller looked at the phone, then at the pile of documents on the table. With a trembling hand she took the pen. "Where?" she growled through clenched teeth. The lawyer pointed, one by one, to the adhesive tabs marking where she needed to sign. Barbara Miller signed with such fury that she nearly tore the paper. When she finished, she threw the pen onto the table as if it burned her. "Mr. Kevin Miller, your turn." Kevin Miller signed like an automaton, without the strength to argue or beg. His signature came out clumsy, almost illegible. "Excellent," said the lawyer, calmly gathering the documents. "One more thing." He extended his hand. "The keys to the car and the house." Then, with the same professional coldness, he delivered the sentence. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property. Tomorrow afternoon our team will come to take possession." Kevin Miller searched his pockets sluggishly, as if he still could not believe what he was doing. He pulled out the key ring to the red car and the house keys, that very house he had once boasted about as his pride, and placed them in the lawyer's hand. When the lawyers finally left, silence fell over the room like a blow. They were alone. Barbara Miller, who moments earlier had held herself up with arrogance and shouting, suddenly broke. Her legs gave out, she collapsed onto the floor and began to cry, an ugly, desperate sobbing. It is all over, our money, our house. Oh Kevin, where are we going to live? He did not answer. He sat down in a chair and stared blankly at the luxury brand bags they had just brought in. Now they lay scattered on the floor, ridiculous like a cruel joke. Meanwhile, upstairs in the downtown penthouse of St. Jude's Medical Center, Emily Sterling had just finished breastfeeding her baby for the first time, without fear, without shouting, without pressure. Her old phone with a slightly cracked screen rested on the nightstand. Suddenly it vibrated. Kevin Miller's name appeared on the screen. A call. The vibration stopped, and then messages began to pour in one after another. 10. As if he were desperate to fill the silence. Love, please answer. I was wrong. Mom fainted. Emily, please, I have nothing left. You are too cruel. We can start over, love, I promise. At that moment, Sarah arrived, Emily Sterling's friend, after receiving Arthur Sterling's message. She saw the flood of messages and pressed her lips together in indignation. My God, Emily, this man has no shame. She looked straight at her. Are you going to answer him? Emily Sterling lowered her gaze to the screen. For an instant, the pitiful image of Kevin Miller's face crossed her mind, but it was immediately replaced by the mocking sneer of Barbara Miller, the exhaustion of seeing herself work until 3 a.m, the cheap blanket, the swallowed humiliations. With a steady hand she picked up the phone. Sarah thought she was going to answer. But Emily Sterling held down the power button and chose to turn it off. The screen went black. There is no us anymore, she whispered to herself. Then she looked at Sarah and for the first time in a long while smiled for real. Now it is just my son and me. The calm of the suite at St. Jude's Medical Center felt like a luxury she had almost forgotten existed. Over the next 2 days she recovered not only physically but mentally as well. She was surrounded by patient nurses, comfortable facilities and, most importantly, safety. Arthur Sterling did not go far. He temporarily moved his office into the suite's living room and handled matters worth millions while keeping a watchful eye on his first grandson. Sarah became her emotional shield. She visited every day, brought food she knew Emily Sterling liked, although the hospital meals were already excellent, and above all made it her mission to make her laugh. On the 3rd day, while peeling an apple, Sarah said casually, "So, what are you going to name this handsome little guy? Do not tell me that since he carries the Sterling last name, you are going to call him Mr. President from day one." Emily Sterling let out a clean, genuine laugh. She looked at the baby, sleeping peacefully in his comfortable crib. "His name is William," she whispered. "William." "Yes. William Sterling." Sarah repeated the name slowly as if trying it out. "It fits him. And it fits you too, this new beginning. Truly, this really is the dawn of your life. And William," Emily Sterling continued softly, "because he is the clearest proof of God's grace in my life. He saved me." While Emily Sterling was finding light on one side of the city, heavy clouds were gathering over the house that had been her false stage for 3 years. Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller were living through the longest 24 hours of their lives. The house felt hollow after the lawyers left. Barbara Miller's explosive rage turned into hysterical, frightening sobbing. She beat her chest and kept repeating, "My house, your father's inheritance. They took it from us, Kevin. They took it from us." "It was already mortgaged, Mom," he replied hoarsely. "We paid it off with Emily Sterling's money." He no longer cared to argue. He just wanted it to end. His head felt numb. And besides, he had been fired. All it took was a single message from Arthur Sterling to the Human Resources Department of his company. Within minutes, his contract was terminated without severance, with a note placed in his file for a serious ethics violation. "We have to leave, Mom. Now." "Where are we going?" Barbara Miller screamed. "Under a bridge," she spat herself bitterly. "You have no money. I do not either. My cards are blocked. It was probably that old man." Kevin Miller did not tell her that he still had a small hidden fund left, off-the-books money he had managed to siphon from the office. He had hidden it even from her. It was his last rope. They packed in suffocating tension. Barbara Miller barely packed clothes. She was busy stuffing the gold jewelry she had bought with Emily Sterling's money into a waist belt and wrapping her designer handbags, few of them authentic, in old cloth bags, hoping the seizure team would not notice. Kevin Miller, for his part, shoved his clothes into a single large suitcase. Before closing it, he glanced into the garage and looked at the red car one last time. Its shine seemed to mock him. The next day at exactly noon the doorbell rang. It was not the lawyer. It was worse. 3 burly men arrived, accompanied by a member of the legal team and the locksmith. "Time is up, Mr. Kevin Miller." "Mrs. Miller," one of the legal team members said flatly. Barbara Miller tried one last performance. She ran to the door and began screaming so the neighbors could hear. "Help! Help! They are throwing us out unfairly. Rich people are trying to steal our house." Several neighbors came out, curious, peeking through their doors. But the legal team was prepared. They showed a copy of the court order and the document Barbara Miller had signed the day before. This woman voluntarily signed an asset transfer as compensation in a case of misappropriation of funds. "Everything is legal. Please do not get involved." The curious looks hardened. Misappropriation of funds. The words spread from mouth to mouth and the murmurs grew. Seeing there was nothing left to do, Barbara Miller deflated. "Collect your belongings and leave, please. We are changing the locks on this house," the employee finished. Under the gaze of dozens of whispering neighbors, Kevin Miller walked out dragging his suitcase. Barbara Miller followed him with a bulging cloth bag, covering her face with the edge of a scarf to hide her shame. "Wait!" Kevin Miller shouted, turning back. The legal team member stopped. "The red car, we could use it to take the luggage. We will return it later, The man looked at him as if he were dust. "Mr. Kevin Miller, that car stopped being yours yesterday. It is a seized asset. Leave." He pointed toward the main street. Kevin Miller lowered his head, walked to the end of the block and hailed an old taxi. He loaded the suitcase and helped his still-crying mother into the back seat. "Where are we going, Kevin?" Barbara Miller sobbed. "To the industrial district by the train tracks," he replied quietly. "It is the only place I can afford with what we have left." As the taxi drove away, the locksmith began working. The sound of the drill tearing through the old lock was desolate. The door closed. The new lock was in place. Their chapter of luxury ended. Officially. Almost at the same time, in the hospital's private lobby, Sarah received a message on her phone. She showed it to Emily Sterling, who was dressed in a simple but elegant dress, a gift from her father. The message was brief. Asset 1, house. Asset 2, car. Secured. Clients Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller cooperated. Emily Sterling read it. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply let out a long, heavy breath. She closed her eyes for a moment. One last tear slipped down her cheek, not of triumph but of closure. A tear that carried away the final remnants of the past. "It is over," Sarah whispered, squeezing her hand. "Yes, it is over," Emily Sterling nodded. At that moment, Arthur Sterling came out of administration, slipping his platinum credit card back into his pocket. Everything was settled. "Let us go, my daughter. Home." A nurse brought William, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket. Emily Sterling stood up from the wheelchair. She still felt some pain, but she refused to be pushed. She walked on her own, took her son firmly in her arms, and left the hospital through the gleaming lobby doors. Outside, a luxury black car with the chauffeur was waiting. She got in, leaving behind the smell of disinfectant and the pain. She did not look back. The ride felt unreal. The car glided silently through the streets. Outside there was traffic, dust, and noise. Inside, she and William were wrapped in calm, cool luxury. She sat in the back seat beside Sarah, while Arthur Sterling, in the front passenger seat, handled business calls as if the world had not just shaken. It was the first time Emily Sterling was seeing the city after so many days trapped in that drama, yet she did not feel like she was going home. She did not know what home she was returning to. Kevin Miller's house was no longer hers, and she had no idea what future her father had prepared for her. The car did not head toward the elegant neighborhood where she had grown up. Instead, it turned toward the financial district and stopped in front of the lobby of an imposing skyscraper. "Dad, where are we going?" Emily Sterling asked, uneasy. "Home," Arthur Sterling replied with a faint smile. They took a private elevator straight to the top floor. When the doors opened, what greeted them was not an office corridor, but the breathtaking living room of a downtown penthouse. Nearly all the walls were made of glass, offering a 360-degree view of the city. The floors were imported marble. The furniture was minimalist, yet clearly worth a fortune. "My God, Dad, where are we?" Emily Sterling froze in place. "In your home. In your son's home," Arthur Sterling replied. Then he took William from Emily Sterling's arms. "My personal assistant has been preparing it since yesterday. Welcome home, my daughter." A middle-aged woman in uniform stepped forward to greet them. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling. I am Mrs. Higgins. I will be William's nanny." And beside her appeared another woman, equally formal. "And I am Mrs. Fletcher, your personal nurse for the postpartum period." Emily Sterling felt even more disoriented. A nanny, a personal nurse. Arthur Sterling led her on a tour of the place. There were 3 bedrooms. The master suite alone was larger than the entire rented apartment she had lived in before. There was also a guest room and another room that had been turned into the most luxurious nursery Emily Sterling had ever seen. The crib was made of solid wood. There was a wardrobe filled with imported educational toys and branded baby clothes. And a climate-controlled air conditioning system with precise temperature control. Sarah let out a low whistle. "Emily, this is insane. It is a palace." That night, after Sarah left and William fell asleep in his elegant crib, Emily Sterling could not sleep. She stood by the enormous window staring at the city lights flickering below. She should have been happy. She was free, she had money, she was safe. Yet her heart would not settle. She felt small. As if she had only changed cages. First the narrow prison of Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller, and now her father's golden cage. She had done nothing to earn this. She was simply Arthur Sterling's daughter. The next morning, after breakfast prepared by her father's personal chef, Emily Sterling went to her father's office in the penthouse. "Dad," she called softly. Arthur Sterling looked up from a stack of papers. "Yes, my daughter. Do you need something? Do you not like the food?" "No, Dad." Emily Sterling took a deep breath. "Thank you. Thank you for everything. For William, for this place. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," he replied gently. "All of this is your right. One that came late." "But I cannot live like this, Dad," Emily Sterling said. Arthur Sterling's expression tightened. "What do you mean you cannot live like this? Like this, being waited on, pitted, being a burden to you again?" "I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I am a mother." She looked him straight in the eyes. "I do not want to be a parasite." Arthur Sterling's face hardened. "A parasite? What do you mean?" "Before, I was a parasite in Kevin Miller's and Barbara Miller's house, even though I worked. And now I feel like a parasite here. I do not want to live off your compassion," Emily Sterling said firmly. "I want to stand on my own." Arthur Sterling remained silent, studying her. He looked for doubt, but found the same spark he had always known, the spark of someone who does not break. Slowly, a smile formed on his lips. A smile of genuine pride. "And what is your plan?" Emily Sterling's heart began to race. "I want to start my own business." "What kind of business?" "I am a graphic designer, but I am also a mother," Emily Sterling began. "Dad, look at all these baby products you bought. They are luxurious, they are excellent, but they must cost a fortune. Not all mothers can afford that. I want to create my own brand of premium quality baby products, with beautiful design, but at a reasonable price." He paused, then continued. "And clothing. Modest clothing for mothers. I know what it feels like to spend the day in worn-out clothes. I know how hard it is to find nursing clothes that are comfortable, elegant, and not revealing. I want to create a modern, modest line for mothers like me. Clothes that make them feel beautiful and respected, even when they are busy caring for their children. Arthur Sterling listened without showing emotion. I have the designs, Emily Sterling said nervously. She took out the tablet he had given her and opened her portfolio folder. Can I do it? I know I can. I just need capital. When Emily Sterling finished, Arthur Sterling leaned back in his chair. All right. It is a good plan. The modest fashion and baby products market never disappears. Really, Dad? Emily Sterling asked hopefully. Of course. I will give you the capital. Her eyes lit up. But, he added, not as a gift. I will give it to you as a business loan. Prepare a proper business plan. Calculate production costs, marketing, expected profits. Present it to me, and if it is viable, I will transfer the funds. Emily Sterling's face brightened even more. That was exactly what she wanted. Not compassion but trust and a real challenge. I will prepare the business plan immediately, Dad. Right away. Good. Bring Sarah in. Make her your general manager. She is smart and loyal. I will give you access to my company's branding team so they can advise you. Arthur Sterling stood up. That is my daughter. Almost at the same time in the industrial district by the train tracks, Kevin Miller woke up to the smell of sewage and the thunder of a train shaking his body. Barbara Miller snored on a thin mat beside him. There was only an old fan spinning with an unbearable noise. Kevin Miller grabbed his phone. There were no messages, no calls. He opened his banking app. Remaining balance, $300, enough to pay the rent for that room for the month and eat cheap. An email from the Human Resources Department of his former company popped up as well. His dismissal was now official. He was officially unemployed with a stained record. Kevin Miller let the phone fall onto the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling covered in cobwebs. He had nothing left. Back at the downtown penthouse, Emily Sterling was on a video call with Sarah. Sarah, do you want to be the chief executive officer of our company? Emily Sterling asked, her voice full of emotion. What? Chief executive officer? Of what company if you just gave birth? Sarah laughed on the other end. Of our company. I'm serious. My father is going to give us the capital. We are going to create our brand, Emily's Collection. Sarah went silent for a moment, then broke into a huge smile. Ready for the position, Madam President. Emily Sterling laughed, ended the call and looked at William, sleeping peacefully in his luxurious crib. We are going to begin, my son, she whispered. She was no longer the weak Emily. She was Emily Sterling, a mother and a future businesswoman. 6 months passed. For Emily Sterling, they were 6 months wrapped in a haze. Diapers, meetings, business plans, sleepless nights because of William, and sleepless nights designing. For Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller, they were 6 months of a slow descent into hell. The room Kevin Miller had paid for with the last of his hidden cash was a 10 by 13 feet cubicle by the train tracks. There was no air conditioning. A small window, when opened, released the stench of a clogged sewer. The plywood walls were so thin that everything could be heard. Every conversation, every argument, every sigh from the neighbors. Every 30 minutes, day and night, a train passed by, shaking the entire building. The woman who once thought herself the queen of social gatherings, Barbara Miller, was now a shadow. The gold jewelry she had hidden in her waist belt was sold off one piece at a time just to eat. Accustomed to being served, she now had to use a shared bathroom at the end of the hallway and wash clothes by hand. That day she sat in front of the room's door, next to the foul-smelling drain, and began scrubbing Kevin Miller's sweat-soaked work clothes in a bucket with cheap detergent. Her hands, once soft, were now rough and aching. The soapy water burned her skin and the stench made her stomach churn. A neighbor, the salad seller, stopped nearby. Washing clothes, Mrs. Miller? How strange. You always took them to the laundromat. Barbara Miller blushed. Just to get a little exercise, she lied. The neighbor laughed. Exercise? Well, look at the sour face you ended up with. Listen, your husband's work clothes need to be scrubbed with a brush, right? Like this. Otherwise, the filth does not come out. She tossed her an old scrubbing brush. The humiliation pierced her to the bone. Tears fell into the dirty water. She hated everything: the stale smell, the neighbor's look, the misery of the room. She hated Kevin Miller, and above all she hated Emily Sterling and her father. At a wholesale market, Kevin Miller was carrying sacks of potatoes. The man who had once been a neat office worker in an immaculate shirt was now a warehouse laborer in an old, torn t-shirt. The body he had once taken care of had grown thin, burned by the sun. With his name tainted and blacklisted everywhere, this was the only job he could get. He was paid $2 for each sack he carried from the truck to the stall. He worked from dawn. His back ached as if it were splitting in two. His hands were torn up, covered in blisters. "Hey, Kevin! Move faster!" shouted the foreman. "It cannot be that, as big as you are, you take so long to move one sack." Kevin Miller did not answer. He swallowed hard, clenched his teeth, and sped up as if his body did not belong to him. At the end of the afternoon they gave him his pay, $70 in crumpled bills, smelling of fish. It was barely enough for rice and instant noodles. Before, $70 would not have even covered 3 hours of parking at a shopping mall. He walked home to avoid spending money on the bus. When he reached the room, he found his mother sitting in the dark. Their electricity had been cut off, and only a single energy-saving bulb worked. "How much did you bring?" Barbara Miller asked hoarsely. Kevin Miller dropped the bills onto the mat. $70. Barbara Miller's eyes flashed with disdain. "Only that? And what did you do all day?" "That is not even enough for rice." "It is enough, Mum. If we save," Kevin Miller snapped, exhausted. "If you stop asking me to buy fabric softener that smells like flowers. Do you think it is easy to earn money? My back is wrecked and my hands are destroyed." Then he looked at her with anger. "And what do you do here? Sit and complain?" "I washed the clothes," Barbara Miller screamed. "And I endured the neighbors' humiliations. Me, Barbara Miller, humiliated by a salad seller. And all because of you." "Because of me?" Kevin Miller let out a bitter laugh. "Whose fault was it, Mom? Who was greedy? Who said, 'This is your reward, son?' Who kept repeating that Emily was a cheap, stupid woman?" Barbara Miller fell silent, her jaw clenched. "You," he shouted, pointing at her. "If you had not been so greedy, if we had given Emily Sterling even $600 out of the $5,000, she would have been happy. And we would still have had $4,400 left each month. We could have kept living well, comfortably, but you wanted everything. Greed, that is your disease." The slap cracked through the room. Barbara Miller hit him with all her strength. "You ungrateful son," she gasped. "You blame me? It is all because you are weak. You never knew how to control your wife. If you had been firm from the beginning, Emily would never have dared." Kevin Miller touched his burning cheek. Something inside him broke. "Weak?" he repeated, his voice trembling. "You made me this way. I did not want to go to prison, and now I have nothing." They shouted, insulted each other, threw blame back and forth as if it gave them air. The roar of the train mixed with their voices. There was no affection left between mother and son, only two desperate people trapped in the punishment they had built for themselves. Exhausted, they fell silent. Hunger growled inside them. Kevin Miller prepared 2 instant soups in an old pot. No eggs, no vegetables, just noodles and the seasoning packet. They ate in silence. Suddenly, their attention went to the only entertainment in the room, an old 14-inch tube television they had bought for $20. Local news was on. A segment was talking about young entrepreneurs. "And our next inspiring figure is Mrs. Emily Sterling," said the news anchor. Kevin Miller and Barbara Miller froze, their spoons suspended in midair. On the screen appeared Emily Sterling's face. She looked different. Beautiful, yes, but with a new light, a confidence she had never had before. She wore an elegant blouse and a dusty pink scarf to match. She was standing in front of a large, luxurious store. The sign was impossible to ignore. "Emily's collection." "Yes, thank you." Emily Sterling's voice sounded clear and steady. "Emily's collection was born from my dream of offering comfortable, elegant, and modest clothing for young mothers." The camera showed the interior. filled with high society customers, picking up garments, browsing baby items, moving quickly as if this were the most sought-after place of the moment. And to celebrate the opening of our first store, Emily Sterling continued, smiling at the camera, we will donate 10% of this month's profits to an orphanage. Crush. Barbara Miller hurled her soup bowl at the television. The screen flickered and went black. Shards of ceramic and broth splattered across the floor. Shameless, she screamed over the roar of the train. Showing off while we live like this. You whore. Kevin Miller did not move. He stared at the black screen. In its reflection he saw his own face. Gaunt, thin, defeated, completely defeated. A year had passed since that day at the hospital. For those who build dreams, time flies. The downtown penthouse, which had once felt foreign, had become a warm home for Emily Sterling and William. Under the guidance of Arthur Sterling, a strict but fair business mentor, Emily's collection grew at a breathtaking pace. The plan had been brilliant. It did not sell just clothing. It sold a story, a community. It had built a brand that understood young mothers. The quality was premium, but the prices remained accessible to the middle class. The result was explosive. In 1 year, Emily's collection opened stores in 5 luxury shopping centers and set up a production workshop that provided jobs to dozens of local seamstresses. That day was special. William's first birthday and the first anniversary of Emily's collection. But the celebration was not held in a luxury hotel. True to her promise, Emily Sterling celebrated it elsewhere. At a modest but clean orphanage on the outskirts of the city. The courtyard was decorated with balloons. Dozens of children sat neatly, their eyes shining at the sight of gift boxes and an enormous cake. William, already crawling, laughed happily in the arms of his grandfather, Arthur Sterling. Emily Sterling stepped onto a small stage, wearing a simple but elegant white dress from her latest collection. Her face was calm, radiant. "Hello everyone," she said softly. "Today I am not here as the director of Emily's collection. I am here as Emily, a mother, and a daughter." She smiled at her father. "A year ago my son William was born and his birth was a new dawn in my life. He taught me the meaning of strength. I want him to learn that true happiness is not in how much we have, but in how much we share." She took a deep breath and continued. "That is why, as a gesture of gratitude for his first birthday and for the first year of Emily's collection, my father and I have decided to finance the complete renovation of this children's center and to establish a foundation to guarantee the education expenses of all these children until they finish high school." Applause erupted. The director of the center was crying with emotion. The children shouted with joy. Arthur Sterling, holding William, was the one applauding the loudest. He looked at his daughter with moist eyes. She had not only succeeded, she had become a great woman. When Emily Sterling stepped down from the stage and picked up William, the phone Sarah was holding vibrated. Sarah glanced at the screen and leaned closer. "Emily," she whispered amid the noise, "there is news." Emily Sterling turned, confused. "What kind of news?" Sarah hesitated for a second. "News about karma." Emily Sterling frowned. Sarah showed her the screen. There were 2 messages. The first came from her father's legal team. "An arrest has been made at a small courier company. Kevin M. has been detained for misappropriation of funds totaling $2,000. He is currently in police custody." Emily Sterling smiled bitterly. Before it had been hundreds of thousands. Now he had fallen over $2,000. With no skill beyond fraud, Kevin Miller had tried to repeat the same thing on a smaller scale and with less caution. And this time he had been caught. Then Sarah slid the screen to the second message, the one she had received minutes earlier from a neighbor in Emily Sterling's former neighborhood. "Miss Sarah, there has been a disturbance in the residential complex. An elderly woman was caught stealing clothes from the communal laundry room in Building C. When she was confronted, she began screaming hysterically." Emily Sterling read it again, her stomach tightening. The staff recognized her. It was Mrs. Barbara Miller, the former mother-in-law of Mrs. Emily Sterling. "She looks emaciated, unrecognizable. The police have taken her away." The woman who once paraded as the queen of social gatherings, boasting luxury handbags, was now a clothes thief. Karma had arrived in the cruelest, most ironic way. With Kevin Miller's arrest, Barbara Miller had lost her only source of income, miserable as it was. Hunger had crushed her pride. Emily Sterling stared at the screen for a long moment. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked cautiously. Emily Sterling took a deep breath. She felt no euphoria, no victory to celebrate. What she felt was something else. Relief. As if a weight she had carried without realizing it for far too long had finally fallen from her shoulders. Fate had closed the chapter for her at last. She locked the screen and handed the phone back to Sarah. "I am okay," she said. "Shli. I feel free." She turned around. There were no shadows of the past left in her eyes. In front of her, William laughed, reaching his little hands toward the cake. Her father smiled at him. "Come, my daughter. It is time to blow out the candle," Arthur Sterling said. Emily Sterling nodded. She stepped closer to her son, lifted him into her arms and kissed his chubby cheek. She stood beside her father, surrounded by the laughter of the children from the orphanage. "Happy birthday, my love," she whispered to William. Emily Sterling closed her eyes for a moment and said a prayer of gratitude. Then she opened them, smiled, and together with William, blew out the 3 candles on the cake. The flame went out and the light remained. The light of her new dawn. Yes. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. And before you go, watch the story we've left here on the screen. We're sure it will make you think and move you just as deeply.